opponents do, he always blocks it, like ASAP, as soon as possible. And sometimes that comes with weak squares. So, yeah, of course, this position is still roughly in the balance, but maybe easier for white to play. Some real threats starting to appear.
And if you were to trade on white's terms by taking on d4, you're giving a beautiful center, a lot of flexibility, and I think it's not a happy choice. Magnus does make it. Pawn takes pawn. Perhaps did not have something better fighting against the two threats. White will recapture. Knight b6 still in the air.
Knight b6 might be on his mind initially as well, because you will be taking the black rook, hitting the black queen. Okay, he does jump in.
Good call, David.
Black rook has to move.
Yep. You're not going to step it up to a7 because you're at the risk of isolating that rook for the rest of the game. Rook to b8. Magnus likes to play with it.
End up winning that pawn if Magnus finds a way to defend it. Knight takes bishop in an open position with control of the center. A very good start, a very strong start for the white pieces.
And there you see Magnus does not like the best strategy there from Wei Yi because he can make these happy moves. Bishop to d2 was a natural move. Just getting ready to
sort of reciprocate those kind of moves to actually improve the position of his pieces. Look at the way Wei Yi tied down the bishop and the queen to defend a5. Magnus, meanwhile,
cannot jump in without getting trapped.
What do you think? He's keeping it, trading it?
I think he has sacrificed the pawn, and yeah, it happens. And Magnus is going to go d5 just to clarify the center. And yeah, this is the thing. Magnus is so good. He knows when to strike out. He knows when to get those central squares for the knight. And now Wei Yi has to find a way to boot that knight away from its powerful square.
You don't want to pick up the pawn on b2. That's a mousetrap. The queen perhaps does eventually end up getting trapped there, chased down the board. Rook b1. Even if you don't end it because there's queen c3. b7 is hanging in so many positions. Very terrifying to make the decision of queen takes pawn.
Yeah, Magnus instead keeps the status quo. He's going to plant his bishop on a nice square. And yeah, Ivanka here, you're 100% right about this black knight. Either it's just a super strong piece and it's going to control the rest of this middle game, or it might just get trapped. But the problem is the white knight would need to move out the way in order to play the move f3 and win this piece in the center. I really like what Magnus has been doing, and he's been doing it quick. Look at the time, it's almost level now. Wei Yi moves his rook. Magnus also shuffles his rook. Is Magnus getting ready to break out now, maybe with c5? Against the bishop pair, accelerating the play, while Wei Yi isn't quite ready yet. Starting to look very, very solid for black.
It's starting to look good, right? Especially with that counter-strike, as you mentioned, and the knight sitting there beautifully on e4. For Wei Yi, he doesn't have time to go knight to e1, f3, trap the knight, because first up, the knight isn't even trapped, and secondly, c5 is coming. So Wei Yi, does he go knight to d2? Does he try to generate play in other ways? What's he doing? Queen goes back to b1. Okay, so he's lining up the queen and bishop on this light square diagonal.
And Magnus Carlsen strikes in the center. He almost looks like is the one who's playing for a win here with the piece activity that he has. And look at the speed with which he's playing now. He's up on the clock. He does trade those two pawns. But watch out, the bishop on e3, eyeing that queen on b6. There are ideas of knight f5.
And get this, Wei Yi has less time on the clock than Magnus.
Yeah, the last 8-9 moves have really been fantastic for Magnus. Somehow he brought all of his pieces to great squares. He's made some nice progress in the center. Now, maybe he'll trade knights to stop any jumps and then block with his dark squared bishop. If he can trade off everything, maybe just leave black with the queen, knights and rooks, then he should be doing well.
But, you know, with so much tension still on and those trades far away, I think it's still anybody's game, just simply looking at the clock. No increment until move 40, right? And only then you get 1 second, which we've seen time and time again at Norway Chess, is barely enough to even get a move in. Magnus considering, does he trade or does he put his bishop? And look at that. He was frustrated that he's taking so long to make a move.
Yeah, he doesn't feel like he's in the flow, Magnus Carlsen. Knight trade, bishop trade, imminent, and still some work to be done. Expecting Wei Yi to come out. Ooh, blue arrow marks that the white queen now should come back where it came from earlier to allow this trade. And he's going to make his move. There we go.
He finds it, but do remember that Wei Yi is in a must-win situation here. He has to win if he wants to walk away with 1.5 points. And there you can see he's got a slight advantage in the clock, and now it's ticked down. And the position is so active for Magnus. It's going to be very, very difficult to win this one.
You know, but the reaction that we had with Magnus on the camera, it almost looked like he's also fighting himself. Like he had to will himself to make a decision, make a move at that moment. Queen e3 on the board. Magnus does have the option to trade everything on the d4 square, simplify the position, get closer to that draw, which is why Wei Yi doesn't recapture with the queen.
Watch out, big threat on the board of rook takes knight. Rook takes knight is the threat, so Magnus has to move the queen. He has to defend, and he moves the knight.
Don't take it, the rook is hanging in the center.
Now the white queen overloaded, needs to keep the rook protected, but not just that, the black knight is coming back to a really nice square. That e6 square is a fantastic blockading square and will boot the white rook out of the center.
Can't you take the pawn on d5? Rook takes pawn, queen takes queen, rook takes rook, comes in with a check, but it perhaps would anyway lead to a drawing endgame.
Yeah, tactics. I'll just put this on the board while Wei Yi thinks rook takes pawn, attacks the black queen. If there's a queen trade, rook takes rook comes with a check. Great spot by Tanya here. White is a pawn up, but these doubled pawns at the end of the variation might just start falling off. So big decision. Do you go into this endgame against the endgame maestro Magnus Carlsen, or do you keep rooks on the board? Do you bring your rook across and try to keep the tension?
You keep the tension. You need to keep the tension. That endgame is a draw, and a draw is not good enough in the Armageddon. He does do so. He does come back with the queen, doubling down on the d5 pawn.
Yeah, and he's adding pressure to that pawn. So big threat, rook takes pawn. So Magnus will have to deal with that one first. But how does he defend that pawn? And he...
Magnus has blundered. He's blundered his piece.
What? And look at him. He reacts. He can't believe it. The rook was hanging on d8. You could not pick up the rook on d4. And Magnus cannot believe what he's just done.
He just laughed because he couldn't quite believe. He blundered like this.
Oh, and Wei Yi gives up his queen. It's currently a queen for black versus 2 rooks and a bishop. We'll break that down again a bit later in slow motion, but he simply moved his rook away from the defense of his other rook and now faces a lost endgame. This is surely a win for white now. All of white's pieces will combine. He's just outnumbered, Magnus. 3 pieces versus 1, a queen not enough. He's going to try and give some spite checks, but yeah, it's all about the clock now. His only chance, Magnus Carlsen.
It's 13 points to 9 if you do the math here. Wei Yi in driver's seat, but can he get it done with just 30 seconds on the clock? Magnus coming in with the queens. Wei Yi's king will have to go up the board. Wei Yi looks up to see where is the move count. 40 move, you get an extra second.
Yeah, and now he sets about trying to find himself a hiding place for the white king. That's what Wei Yi has to do, because Magnus's only hope is to keep on giving checks with the queen. And, well, g5, trying to cause chaos.
King can hide on that h2 square. It can also be defended by its own pieces. Wei Yi, he wants to double down on the f7 tender spot. Will he simply slide back? He does it. Some more checks. But f7, you're about to lose that pawn.
There's not too many checks, and wow, the queen comes to h2 with a stamp. But there you see Wei Yi just playing great chess here.
Classy.
He's cut the black king off here. He's going for checkmate. Checkmate in 2 moves threatened. Rook takes pawn, followed by rook coming up to the top of the board. This is over. Magnus just needs to give some checks, pray for a miracle, but the white king is hiding. This one's going to be over any second now.
Wow, it's a king march, and Wei Yi's king will hide on a2. Is Magnus Carlsen about to resign and go down for the second time in an Armageddon against Wei Yi in Norway Chess? Rook takes pawn, rook d8 is the big threat.
Well, Wei Yi doesn't have so much time. 12 seconds on the clock. So if Magnus can keep the black king still alive, there might be a chance to say 6 seconds.
Rook g6, he does it. Rook g8, undefendable. Magnus Carlsen resigns.
Wow, a huge blunder from Magnus Carlsen deciding this game. Almost unthinkable that the world #1 would do this.